Hey, it is Matt and Dave from DSXtuning.com talking to you about some injectors and injector data today. We've had a video series about the Atlas port controller and its auxiliary components, everything from widebands to the hardware. Today we're talking about injectors. The world wants to know, why are you such a dick about fuel injectors?
Because it matters. I mean, this is like the biggest point about everything is data matters. Everything behaves predictably when you have good data.
So what is data when it comes to fuel injectors?
We're talking about voltage offsets, short pulse adder, your flow rate versus pressure. I mean, all of that plays into linearizing the injectors. The whole goal of all of that data is that you can say, I want this amount of fuel, figure out how long to pulse the injector, so that I get an accurate reading. I mean, it's kind of the same concept. You wouldn't go to the gun range with a bad optic,
Sure. Yeah, it all starts at the top, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So a garbage in, garbage out scenario. So with that said, as far as the injector data is concerned, why is injector dynamics the best? Why is that what we've committed to for a majority of fitments? Obviously, we're still using some OE fit stuff. We support LS3 and LSA and even the 50-pound the factory flex fuel injectors. What makes injector dynamics so good at what they do?
I mean, Paul Yaw is just brilliant. Like, that's a big part of it. And he acknowledged a problem years ago, which was that people were making all these injectors that flow a crap load of fuel, but they don't behave predictably. You've got a system where you started off with injectors that were good and they were characterized properly, and then you throw this other crap in and suddenly everything's out of whack. Oh, my battery voltage fluctuates. Oh, my delta pressure's different, and now everything is wrong. And he took it upon himself to figure out, how do you reliably get this data? And it's all done through measuring, processing too. You have to process the end results that you get, and you have to know how to go from, the data you've gathered into what these formats are. But when you break it down, it's not terribly complicated, but it is horribly important. And that's why, if you put in mystery injectors to whatever, you don't get repeatable results. And what you shouldn't have to do is go back later and tweak, I'm going to tweak my offset table and I'm going to tweak the flow rate here and just, I'm going to try to fix my system so that my pressure never changes. That's ghetto.
So if you were to, for the end user, okay, obviously tuners and industry professionals will have their idea of what they like to see and what their definition, how they explain it to themselves or their customers. If you were to have an analogy that would explain injector data to the end user or to the person who's just trying to learn a little bit more, what would that look like?
Get a glass of water and put a straw in it and take a sip, but just do it real quick. And you'll probably realize, I didn't get anything. I need to go longer. Well, keep going until you realize, okay, well, now I've actually gotten a sip of water. That time delay, that's an offset. You know that you have to create a vacuum on this straw for X amount of time before you get any reward. Let's say you suck on the straw for 1 second, and it takes half a second for any water to come out. Well, now you suck on it for 10 minutes. You're not going to notice that initial delay if you're doing it for 10 minutes, but for really short intervals, that becomes a large portion of whatever that total time you spend working on it is.
Sure.
Well, that offset starts to change when you change your straw. If suddenly your straw is longer, or it's bigger in diameter, or it's a weaker material and can collapse under the vacuum, that's going to change that relationship.
Sure.
And if you don't know what that relationship is, you don't know what to expect. You have to start from scratch, and you have to find it.
But if you do know, you won't be surprised.
Exactly. You know what to expect, you know what to do going into it, and you will just get repeatable results. And the same thing applies to injector data, where if it's just right, your battery voltage can fluctuate, or your pressure can fluctuate, or any number of other things that you've found a correlation for and entered in and compensated for. You can take all of that and you can get an expected result.
With that said, obviously we're talking about injector dynamics for our port injector selection for a majority of fitments. An ID 1050 will support basically any consumer fitment.
Yeah.
I think we found that with a factory LT4 high side, we're supporting in the up to 13 or 1400 horsepower. Using ethanol even.
Yep.
So, really impressive fitment. It's really a consideration of how easy do you want the project to be, and I think that makes it a big deal. This same thing applies to your DI injectors.
Sure. I mean, you have to stop and realize you've got two systems, and they both function kind of the same when you boil it down. Now, with your DI injectors, usually your drivers operate at a fixed voltage, so now voltage variation doesn't really matter.
Sure,
but there's still a pressure delta. There is a change for that, and all of that has to be compensated for. And if it's not, well, now your DI side may be inaccurate. So even though you've cleansed your port side by using a factory GM injector or an injector dynamics injector, you're still dirty on the other side if you don't have reliable data. That's why we just push people to use factory injectors in the DI side, so that you know that this stuff has been validated. It's right. I'm going to get predictable, repeatable results.
Well, I think it's worth mentioning at that point that you really aren't sacrificing much by leaving the factory DI injectors in place. Once you have port fuel, once the Atlas port controller is installed, at that point, the sky's the limit.
Yeah.
You don't need to continue to upgrade the DI side of things. And if you have an OE part in place, we're getting the most reliable result. We're not going to be surprised on the back end.
Yeah.
So we've covered a decent bit as far as injector data goes. Is there anything else you want to add as far as what's included with good data? As far as, hey, injector dynamics, they offer a complete data set that's available to everyone. It's not a mystery. And as far as OEM GM stuff goes, that's found in factory calibrations, and
you can rely on that.
Totally. Is there anything you want to add as far as that talking point goes?
Well, I know there's another option out there right now. Like Greg Banish offers a service where he will characterize a set of injectors for you. I have not personally ever used it, but I mean, he knows what he's talking about, and from what I've heard from other people, the results you get are pretty accurate. That's definitely an option, but the last thing I would do is just take something at face value and throw it in.
Sure.
Because we're really just, I mean, not to be rude about it, but we're just kind of not going to entertain concerns about inaccuracies when you aren't using good equipment to begin with.
If the base of the system isn't set up properly, it's really hard to move forward with any kind of diagnosis or anything if you're starting with garbage in. I think that's a pretty fair thing to say. So with that said, within the Atlas port controller, I think we've mentioned it before, we can predefine that value for you where you just plug it in. You can also select the value yourself. Obviously, Injector Dynamics, a big company, you can buy in a lot of places. Okay, so if you already have your own injectors, totally fine. If you want us to set the unit up for you before you get it, we can do that. You can also select these. They're predefined. There's, again, I think there's LS3, LSA, factory 50-pound ethanol safe injectors,
injectors
from General Motors. Then we'll have Injector Dynamics, the 1050s, which again, that's most fitments. I think that's pretty fair to say. Then ID 1300s and ID 1700.
Yeah, which are probably gross overkill for 95% of people.
You can add your own data. That is a possibility. But at that point, if you were having some inconsistencies here or there, it's much harder to troubleshoot if that's what we're starting with. But that is a possibility. So if you have a set of injectors that you're really comfortable with, tuners, shops, resellers, etc., you have your favorites, that can all be added to this. No sweat. So anything else you want to cover on that topic?
No, I just think I think most people are going to find that their needs are met with either LS3 injectors. If you want to go past about 900 horsepower. And now, when we talk about power numbers, we're talking about having a supercharger in the system. So if you're turbo, lap for yourself and add about 200 horsepower to whatever we're talking about.
Yeah.
Because you're not losing that driving a blower. Beyond that 900 mark, you're probably looking at ID 1050s, and that's going to get you most of the way that you need to go. If you need to go beyond that, you probably have a pretty serious setup. I'd look into the 1300s. I would say probably almost nobody's going to need 1700s.
Yeah, that's fair. And again, we're not expecting to see factory high side stuff. You can still use it if you've been doing this for a long time. You already have the upgraded high side stuff, the pump, the injectors. You can leave all that in place. It's that's already been done and handled. Just the factory stuff just gives you a good starting point. And if you haven't already upgraded the DI side of things, you don't have to. You can just move straight forward with port fuel.
Yep.
Anything else you want to cover there?
No, I think that that's pretty complete. I mean, there's not a lot to it. It's just respect yourself and start with something good. It's going to pay dividends in the end when you're not wasting a bunch of time chasing these artifacts that, I mean, we've seen firsthand from people that have used the controller with crap, for lack of a better word. We have the wideband system, but that is not meant to carry you to the finish line. It's that's your safety net, not your, it's not supposed to do the job for you.
So I think we'll wrap this one there. If you have any questions or you have questions about Injector specifically, anything like that, you can direct them to Dave at dsxtuning.com, Matt at dsxtuning.com. We'll do our best to respond to comments, emails, etc. about the topic, and we'll go from there. So we appreciate you watching. Thanks.